Jailed for years, now reported to be close to execution. Is Saudi Arabia ramping up the campaign against religious scholars? Why are they being targeted? And what message will it send about human rights in the kingdom? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zeidan. Saudi Arabia has jailed many activists and dissidents since Mohammed Bin Salman became the crown prince 2 years ago. Now, media reports suggest 3 religious scholars may be sentenced to death after the Muslim month of Ramadan. Salman Al-Odah, Awad Al-Qarni and Al-Omari were arrested in September 2017 on what Saudi Arabia described as terrorism charges. They're seen as reformists, though, who've spoken out about human rights. Awad's son says his father has been in solitary confinement. The United Nations and rights groups have been calling for their release. Last month, Saudi Arabia executed 37 people on terror-related charges. Most of them were Shia activists. So who are the scholars? Well, Salman Al-Odah is internationally renowned for his ideas on reforming Islamic law. He has more than 13 million Twitter followers. His supporters say he was detained for tweeting a prayer calling for reconciliation between Saudi Arabia and Qatar during the Gulf crisis. Al-Omari is a cleric and broadcaster who mainly campaigned against violence and called for more rights for women. His TV and YouTube channels attract thousands of viewers. Awad Al-Qarni is a preacher and author. He's previously been accused of having links to the Muslim Brotherhood, which is banned in Saudi Arabia. Al-Qarni was barred from tweeting just before his arrest. We've asked human rights groups for comment. Amnesty International says it can't confirm the reports that the men may be executed, but says the Saudi public prosecution's recurring calls for the death penalty in cases of a number of individuals detained for peacefully exercising their rights to freedom of expression, association and assembly, including Sheikh Salman Al-Odah, raises the alarm about the fate of detained activists and religious clerics. Let's bring in our guest then. Joining us we have from Sidi Bouzid in Tunisia via Skype, Sami Hamdi, Editor-in-Chief of the International Interest, a current affairs magazine. In Waterloo, Canada, Bessma Momani, Professor of Political Science at the University of Waterloo. And also on Skype from Washington, D.C., Al-Ahmed, Director of the Gulf Affairs Institute and a former Saudi political prisoner himself. Welcome to you all. If I could start with Bessma. So, how serious, how worrying are these reports that the Saudi authorities are planning to execute these scholars?
I think it's very worrying. Of course, this follows a number of very prominent and I would say mass execution of a number of people. We saw in April 37. There is reportedly up to 100 this year alone, and the rise in number of executions has been steadily going up. In terms of the 3 preachers, I think it is putting a chill on everybody. I mean, obviously, the fact that this will happen after Ramadan, which is going to be, I think, a very interesting time regionally with a number of political shifting issues, particularly with the deal of the century and a lot of focus on a whole host of regional challenges, including Iran. It really is quite problematic, but it really demonstrates, I think, the Saudi government's attempt to put a chill in preventing all political opinions and views that counter, frankly, the government's, very monolithic kind of narrative.
Sami in Sidi Bouzid. Now, they're accused of terrorism, but they are very well-known figures in the Arab world. They've had TV shows, they've got considerable followings on social media. How credible are these charges against them actually seen in the Arab world?
I think it's important to note that this has been a steady, a gradual crackdown on the religious scholars. Let's remember that Mohammed Bin Salman has promised the US, promised Europe that he will take Saudi Arabia towards liberalism, towards opening up society and the like. So he has been clamping down on religious scholars in particular. It began with Abdulaziz al-Trifi, it began with Salman al-Dawish. Sheikh Salman al-Dawish, they say, has been killed under torture. And then after the Gulf crisis, it became Salman al-Odah's turn and Awad al-Qarni and the like. Moreover, Mohammed bin Salman has been placing heavy pressure on other high-profile figures. He went to Sheikh al-Mughamsi and ordered Sheikh al-Mughamsi to come out on TV. Sheikh al-Mughamsi, for those who don't know, is a very prominent imam from the Quba Masjid, which is a very popular mosque, to come out and publicly back Mohammed bin Salman. Awad Al-Qarni, who is arguably has the same level of fame as these three scholars, had to come out on TV and apologize for everything that he said in the past. And everybody read this as a clear sign that he had been threatened by Mohammed bin Salman. If you're Mohammed bin Salman and you saw how you got away with the Khashoggi case, you saw that the international community didn't move in the Khashoggi case because, as one analyst put it in Bloomberg, they put that the idea of liberalization, the idea of opening Saudi Arabia is a great cause, and Mohammed bin Salman can push forward with that. The idea that if you're Mohammed bin Salman and you see the reaction to liberal activists, to Raif Badawi, you see a big campaign, to Rahaf al-Qunun, you see a big campaign. When it comes to religious scholars, the campaign is half-hearted. You see that religious scholars are now easy territory. It's easy hunting ground. Mohammed bin Salman is going after them because he knows there will not be a great push against a great backlash.
A pushback and not perhaps a lot of familiarity with them outside of the Arab world. Well, you've packed in a lot of points which we need to unpack there, Sami. But before we do that, perhaps Ali in Washington, D.C., just to clarify for those who aren't very perhaps familiar with these three figures, these are scholars who are considered within Saudi Arabia pretty mainstream. They've got considerable followings. They don't have a history of like revolutionary speech or activism or calling for violence or the overthrow of the ruling family, right?
Yes, definitely. In fact, they were very close to the ruling family in the past before Mohammed bin Salman came aboard. And Mohammed bin Salman's behavior really comes from his own personal, from a person that he does not like anyone who do not agree with him. And these did not clap for him. These three people did not clap for him. So he decided to get him out of the way because he only accepts complete and utter loyalty. And that's why you saw Awad Al-Qarni and others basically, and even the Imam of Mecca calling Mohammed bin Salman as a divinely guided individual. So this is a time where Mohammed bin Salman is ordering everyone to bow down to him and clap for every move that he says. Without that, you are in danger. Salman Al-Odah did not criticize the government, did not criticize Mohammed bin Salman, but he did not clap for him, and that's why he is threatened with death. And this is a very serious situation. People might think, oh, this is just talk. We thought that before they executed Sheikh Namr, and then we were wrong, and they executed 37 people a couple of weeks ago. So this is the danger here is very high. That we might be surprised and shocked, but we must be prepared and then try to stop this. And we are at our organization, we're trying to do that with a campaign we're launching.
Bessma, if this happens, the execution of popular Sunni scholars, would there be a turning point for Saudi Arabia?
I think the turning point long past, frankly. You know, we've seen this encompass so many different people, from activists, of course, we expect, but, you know, journalists, poets, intellectuals, yes, religious scholars, but even the collective punishment of family members who are associated or may literally just be related to activists. I mean, that kind of collective chill is very problematic. It is not, frankly, a sign of modernization. It is a sign of a weakness inside the government, and it's a shame because, frankly, some of the economic reforms and even some of the social reforms.
Do you think that point, Bessma, has been lost on some observers or some political powers in the West in particular?
Look, I think the social and economic reforms are very popular and well done. I mean, I think this is great news for Saudis and Saudi Arabia. But frankly, when you go after mild critics, when you go after poets and intellectuals and professors, it's a signal of weakness, and it's a shame. It's a shame because, frankly, not only do the Saudi people deserve better, but frankly, it's unnecessary. And all it does is, I think, create fear. It creates a mass, chill in the air that ultimately, I think, really bites the entire country back in terms of the prosperity that they were on the right path to achieve in terms of the economic reforms and social reforms they were after.
Sami, on a point which you raised there, it's important to keep in mind these are not the only 3 scholars who've been arrested, right? When you start going through the list, though, you find some pretty, what would appear to be normal, well-recognized, respected people in recognized Saudi institutions. For example, the former dean of the Quran school at Medina University, who died after being arrested. He died in January. Abdullah Al-Ahmed, a human rights activist and also professor at the Islamic University in Riyadh. Should we be surprised at that type of person being targeted?
Mohammed bin Salman has been launching this campaign of I am fighting extremism, I am fighting this Salafism, I am fighting this extremist idea that has inspired Al-Qaeda, that has inspired ISIS, that has inspired the like. This is the narrative he's been propagating in London, in Washington, in Paris, in Brussels, and the like. The real problem here is that they have been receptive to this kind of message.
But let me jump in here,
Sami.
Sami. Some people like Salman Al-Odah are on the record as criticizing the ideas of Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
That's very true, but you know that, I know that, the people in the Arab world, they know that. The people outside see a man in a beard who's wearing the clothes that are typical of religious scholars and the like, and Mohammed bin Salman is saying these people are the problem. This is one of the real issues that we really have to discuss when it comes to Saudi Arabia. What is Mohammed bin Salman trying to do? Ali Al-Ahmed made a valid point when he said that Mohammed bin Salman, it's not enough that you stay silent, you must openly clap for him. This is what he forced Awad Al-Qarni, one of the biggest scholars in Saudi Arabia, this is what he forced him to do on TV. You have to publicly clap for me. With regards to Salman Al-Odah, he was put in prison because he came out with a statement where he said that I hope that Qatar and Saudi Arabia reconcile and I hope they come to some sort of reconciliation. Even that was considered too much for Mohammed bin Salman. Because Mohammed bin Salman knows one thing. In Saudi Arabia, if you visit anybody who's been to Saudi Arabia before and met the ruling family, they will say that the ruling family always says, we are ruling because we lifted the flag of God, the flag of Allah, and the flag of Islam. In other words, it is an emphasis of just how powerful these religious scholars are on the Saudi society, how much influence they actually have. These religious scholars are celebrities in Saudi society. If they come out and they say, like Abdulaziz Al-Tarifi, who wrote on Twitter, he was in prison for this tweet. He said that if we give Aramco to the Americans will use Aramco against us. They will never accept us for who we are. They are just trying to milk us and to embezzle us. When you look at, for example, Sulaiman al-Dawish, all he wrote on Twitter was, "Oh king, don't give your son too much power." Safar al-Hawali was in a hospital bed when he was arrested. Sheikh Safar al-Hawali, who was one of the mentors of Salman Al-Odah, one of the group that was called the Awakening. Safar al-Hawali essentially wrote, "Oh Saudi government, if we follow the Emiratis, if we follow the UAE, we will be ruined. And if we follow Trump, Trump will keep taking money from us and using that money against us." He was imprisoned for this.
So these are people, let me jump in. These are seen as scholars who are slightly independent, shall we say, of towing the usual government line. That seems to be the common denominator that they all have. But let me come back to Bessma before I come to Ali. The arrest of such figures, though, I mean, it's one thing to talk about. Unfortunately, we got used to talking about crackdown on women drivers, the Shia minority, youth bloggers. But this is now the backbone of the kingdom. It's religious circles. Is this going to create more alienation amongst the backbone of the kingdom?
Absolutely, because even insider, frankly, let's be frank, even a political and economic insider might start to think, wait a minute, if I'm not clapping loud enough, am I next? That's really the chill in the air that frankly stifles everything from economic investment ultimately to continued faith in one's government. It is a collapse of trust in government and authority in government if they continue to do this. And this is where I think it's so short-sighted on the part of the Saudi government, frankly.
Let me try and be devil's advocate here for a moment with Ali. The Saudi government, the line is that, they've arrested people under the terror law who've committed offences and they're going through the legal process. You've had a particular personal experience with the legal process in Saudi Arabia. How much of a fair legal process does one get?
I know that happened a long time ago, and there was no judicial process. There is no judicial process today as well, because you have this court that they created just to deal with the political opposition and label everybody as a terrorist. And we know so well that this court, the terror court, is basically just a commission that they started, and they already handed you your sentence. There is no process. I mean, I don't call it a judicial process. I call it a court because it lacks basic requirements for a judicial system. And we know that Saudi courts are not independent. They are sectarian. They are racist. They do not meet any minimum of international standards when it comes to the judicial process. The prosecution is the same thing. People who were tortured or even executed, like we have a case of one of the people who were executed in April. He was not even sentenced to death, but he was executed. These are political executions aimed at subjugating the population. Today is very hard to do that because just today, for example, 2 more people come out on Twitter saying we are against the ruling family. So what Mohammed bin Salman is trying to do is trying to scare the population. And if he goes ahead and executes these very popular clerics, Sheikh Salman Al-Odah in particular, he is going to have much more people coming out against him. So he's going to be destroying his own palace this way.
Right.
I think here what we are dealing with is an instability,
right.
the increasing instability of the regime.
Well, that's definitely an issue I want to pick up on. But before we do that, on January the 2nd, 2018, the United Nations human rights experts, which is part of the Human Rights Council, condemned Saudi Arabia for ignoring UN calls for the release of detainees, some of which are included in these 3 that we're talking about today. And they said they were arrested for things like arrested for breaking allegiance to the ruler, arrested without a warrant in some cases, and subjected to secret trials. With that sort of background, Bessma, what are the chances that they could actually fight their way out of this one?
You know, I don't think, as Ali pointed out, there isn't clear judicial process here. These are kangaroo courts in the sense they're pretty much, fait accompli before they've even started. We know what the sentence is going to be by virtue of the process being so unfair. We haven't seen, in many cases, media being allowed to come in, or some sort of, transparency is just really not part of this process. And so, again, it destroys faith in these kinds of institutions. It, again, creates this entire feeling throughout society that one could be next. And of course, as we know, there's no real red line, it seems, with this particular government in terms of, who is going to be on the chopping board next in terms of sacrificed for being critical of the regime. Certainly, we saw with the 200 some persons that were arrested a few years back in the Ritz-Carlton, that could include family members, that could include of the royal family, that could include political insiders, and that's really quite problematic. It's not a healthy way to grow your country, both financially and, frankly, from a nationalistic perspective. It's very, very problematic.
Sami, has the lack of, I guess you could say, Ali wants to get in. Go ahead, Ali. Yes.
Just want to say that, look at the record. There hasn't been a single person found innocent in these courts, not one person. That tells you that when they arrest you, you are guilty by definition. That's how the court system works in Saudi Arabia works.
I guess Saudi authorities, I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, but I guess Saudi authorities will say that's how good our criminal conviction system is. Although, as I mentioned, a lot of human rights groups and the UN have some serious doubts about the process. Let me take it to Sami Hamdi and say the lack of, I guess some would say, very serious consequences for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, for the execution of 37 Saudis, mostly Shia activists in April, has that kind of background. Do you think it's given the authorities the feeling or the impression that they can get away with more executions like this?
I think if you really want to play devil's advocate, I don't agree with Bessma and Ali Al-Ahmed when they say that this causes really severe distrust in institutions and it hurts Mohammed bin Salman's image and it hurts his regime. On the contrary, Mohammed bin Salman, when he came to power, he came on the pretext of the fact that Saudi Arabia is a hub for terrorism, is a hub for extremism. Mohammed bin Salman has said on every occasion, to Washington, to Paris, to London, I am here to stop this extremism and I will take all necessary procedures. There was a New York Times article, I think it's by Friedman, who said that these were jarring but necessary measures to be taken when he imprisoned the people in the Ritz. Bin Salman is going to the Western states and saying, look, you may not like the way I'm doing it, but this is all to get rid of extremism and terrorism. The problem is not that he got away with Khashoggi. The problem is that there is a genuine resonance in Mohammed bin Salman's message. They believe that this is Saudi Arabia, the rules are a bit different, But the fact is that these scholars, whether it's Salman Al-Odah, whether it's Awad Al-Ghani, whether it's Aid Al-Ghani, whether it's Al-Maghamsi, the fact that the religious authorities have such power in society is a problem. It must be a secular liberal society, and Bin Salman is promising that. He is promising to remove the influence of religion. It doesn't matter if Salman Al-Odah is considered a reformist. This is why, although here we are saying this is wrong, the executions are wrong. The Americans are saying this is necessary. The Europe is saying this is necessary. And the proof of that is the way that they ignored Khashoggi, because the bigger picture means that Mohammed bin Salman is required. He's required to implement the deal of the century. He's required to fight against Iran. He's required in order to push back against Iranian influence. He's required because he is pushing forward this liberal ideas that we've been calling for ages. Bin Salman is seeking to cement his power, but he's doing it in a way where it falls in line with
I can
this
see
vision.
Ali is shaking his head in disagreement, so let me give him a chance to come in.
If Mohammed bin Salman was really going after extremism and terrorism, the people who bombed the mosques in Qatif, in the Shia area specifically, has not been put on trial. Not a single member of ISIS has been put on trial or executed. And these people were arrested way before Salman Al-Odah was. What the Saudi government and monarchy has been doing over the years is allowing the extremists to fester and targeting the real threat, which is the moderates, the people who want to share.
Okay, let's, Ali, if I can jump in, just to clarify a few things. Of course, Saudi Arabia says it has arrested Al-Qaeda members, and there have been trials and executions. When it comes to the Qatif situation, of course, that might be a bit different. But before we get perhaps off the rails here, hang on, Sami. Let's clarify.
Sure.
I think the point which Sami was trying to make there is the message that comes out of Mohammed bin Salman, that I'm taking measures to crack down on extremism, whether or not it's really extremism that he's cracking down on, and certainly in the case of some of these scholars who've spoken out against extremism, that would put a question mark on that. But whether that message that I'm taking necessary measures to reform Saudi Arabia and make it a more liberal country, or make it a country in which religion doesn't have, or religious powers don't have so much influence. Bessma, does that at all resonate in the West? Does that, in your understanding, cause some to overlook the abuses that can occur to, or miscarriages of justice, according to human rights groups, to people like these three?
Yeah, look, without a doubt, many people in the West see these long beards, and they are men with long beards, and do, frankly, unfortunately, associate them with an extreme and radical view of Islam. And of course, we know there's lots of shades of gray there, and many of those with long beards are not violent, and indeed may have in principle some reformist or moderate views. But yeah, absolutely, let's not forget here, I think, Sami is right in the one point, and that frankly the West doesn't care. The more, Islamic leaning political advocates you can execute, one less potential long-term terrorist. That's the unfortunate misperception here in the West. It is a reality. And I think very much, just as, I'll be blunt, just as much as Bashar al-Assad used it to label every person that fought against him as terrorist, similarly, the regime is doing the same in Saudi Arabia, and it sells in certain quarters who don't understand the variation. And frankly, I would say that the problem here is, yes, absolutely, there are way too many men with long beards throughout the entire Arab and Muslim world who are very much intolerant, very much illiberal, but this is a very wide net. It is not selective, and Saudi Arabia does have a lot to basically answer for in terms of causing so much of the radicalization. It stems, frankly, from a very obscure interpretation of Islam that doesn't resonate with the vast majority of Muslims. So there's a lot for them to be accountable for, but I think they are playing on Western ignorance. They are playing on indifference, particularly in the White House, which really, frankly, does not care about what's happening in political circles as far as the democracy promotion is in the Middle East. And they are, in that sense, frankly, winning.
All right, so that was a sweeping critique of Saudi Arabia, the whole Arab world, as well as the West. Very nicely summarized there. Perhaps we'll end on the words of our guests there and thank all of our guests, Sami Hamdi, Bessma Momani and Ali Al-Ahmed. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zeidan, and the whole team here, for now, it's goodbye.